The sun was setting over the endless desert, painting the sky in hues of orange and red. The heat of the day slowly began to fade, but the air remained dry, carrying the scent of dust and sagebrush. Jackson, a lone cowboy, trudged wearily across the desert, his boots sinking into the soft sand with every step. He had been walking for days, searching for water, food, and any kind of shelter. His canteen had long run dry and his stomach had grown tight with hunger. Jackson wasn't a man who liked to ask for help. He had spent his life on the move, riding across vast open lands, living by his own rules. But now, deep in the heart of the desert, something had changed. The loneliness weighed heavily on him. His heart ached for companionship, for even a brief moment of human connection. The long days on the trail, the endless miles of empty land, had begun to feel like a prison. He had been a cowboy for most of his life, working cattle, breaking horses, and living free under the wide, open sky. But that freedom had come with a price. As the years passed, Jackson had begun to feel more like an outsider, always on the move, never staying in one place long enough to build relationships. People had come and gone in his life, but none had ever stayed. He wasn't a man who knew how to make lasting friendships, and he had no family left. It was just him, his horse, and the endless horizon. But today something felt different. The desert had begun to change, and ahead of him he noticed something. A small cluster of tents, smoke rising into the air, and the sound of voices. It wasn't much, but it was a sign of life. Hope stirred in Jackson's chest as he quickened his pace. The idea of finding food and water, even the possibility of a few moments of kindness from strangers, filled him with renewed energy. As he approached the camp, his heart raced with both excitement and caution. He knew better than to approach strangers without caution, especially in a place like this. The desert was unforgiving, and its people even more so, but desperation pushed him forward. He needed help. The camp wasn't like anything Jackson had seen before. The people were different. Dressed in simple but sturdy clothes, their faces marked with the wisdom and strength of years spent in the harsh desert. They were Apache, a tribe known for their resilience and fierce independence. Jackson knew of them, but he had never been close to one. He had heard stories, but none had prepared him for the presence of the woman standing at the edge of the camp. She was unlike anyone Jackson had ever seen. Tall, strong, and with a calm that seemed to hold the power of the desert itself, the woman stood out even among her people. Her name was Etched, and she was the daughter of the chief. Her stature was imposing, and there was an air of authority about her. Yet as she looked at Jackson with piercing eyes, there was also a kindness, something soft beneath her tough exterior. It was clear that she wasn't someone to be taken lightly, but at the same time she carried a sense of dignity and grace that commanded respect. Jackson hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to approach her. He had always been a man of few words, preferring to let his actions speak for him. But now, standing before this powerful woman, he felt something shift inside him, a need to connect, to speak, to explain himself. "Please," he said, his voice rough from days of travel. "I need water, and food if you have it." Etched studied him for a moment, her eyes never leaving his face. Jackson felt exposed, as if she could see every inch of his soul. He shifted uncomfortably under her gaze, but held his ground. "Why do you come here?" she asked, her voice deep and steady, like the distant rumble of thunder. "I'm lost," Jackson replied simply, the truth hanging heavy between them. "I've been wandering for days. The desert's been unforgiving. I need help." There was no hesitation in her response. Without a word, Etched turned and beckoned him to follow. She led him to the campfire, where a few members of her tribe had gathered, cooking over an open flame. Jackson's stomach growled at the sight of food, and he felt a deep sense of relief wash over him. These people, despite the differences between them, were offering him the kindness he had not expected. They gave him food and water, and as he ate, Jackson couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at Etched's strength. It wasn't just her physical presence, though that was undeniable. It was the way she moved with purpose, the way she commanded the attention of those around her without saying a word. She had an aura of calm, a quiet confidence that made Jackson feel like he had stumbled into something far greater than he had imagined. As the night wore on, Jackson sat by the fire listening to the sounds of the camp, the crackling of the flames, the soft murmur of voices, the occasional clink of metal. Everything seemed peaceful here, far from the harshness of the desert that had been his world for so long. Atsari sat beside him, her posture relaxed but alert, as if she were always aware of her surroundings. Jackson, in a rare moment of vulnerability, glanced at her and spoke again, his voice softer now. "I've never met anyone like you," he said, almost to himself. "You're different from what I imagined." Atsari didn't respond immediately. She simply looked at him, her expression unreadable. After a moment, she smiled slightly, a small curve of her lips that made Jackson's heart race. It wasn't a smile of mockery or derision, but one that held a quiet understanding. She could see something in him that he hadn't even fully recognized in himself. "I am different," she said, her voice calm, yet full of meaning. "But so are you." Jackson wasn't sure what she meant by that, but the words stayed with him. As the night stretched on, he felt the weight of his own thoughts, his own loneliness lift just a little. For the first time in days, he didn't feel completely alone. In the company of Atsari and her people, he found a brief moment of peace. But as the fire burned low and the stars filled the desert sky, Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that his encounter with this powerful Apache woman would change him in ways he didn't yet understand. Something in her presence stirred something deep inside him, a desire to prove himself not just to her, but to himself. As he lay down to sleep under the vast desert sky, he knew that the next day would bring new challenges, and that he had a long road ahead of him. But for now he could rest, knowing that for the first time in a long while he wasn't alone. The next morning, Jackson awoke to the sound of birds singing in the distance, the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze, and the warmth of the early sun on his face. He lay still for a moment, absorbing the peacefulness of the Apache camp. For the first time in days, he felt like he could breathe again. The harshness of the desert, the struggle for survival, seemed a world away. Instead of the empty silence he had grown accustomed to, there was life around him. A life that felt simple yet strong. Atsari was already up, moving with purpose as she spoke with a few members of the tribe. Her presence was commanding, but there was something about her that made Jackson feel both at ease and yet, in some ways, challenged. It was as if she were inviting him to become something more, something better than the man he had been before this encounter. He didn't know exactly what that meant, but the feeling was there, strong and unshakable. As he sat up and began to pack his things, Atsari approached him. Her gaze met his, and without a word, she handed him a bundle of dried meat and a small pouch of water. Jackson took it gratefully, but he couldn't help but notice the way she studied him, as if she were trying to understand him, see into him. He wasn't sure what to make of it, but it stirred something deep within him. "You're not just passing through, are you?" Atsari asked, her voice steady but curious. Jackson hesitated, unsure how to respond. It was true. He had come here looking for a simple meal and a moment of rest, but now he felt like he was being drawn into something far deeper than just a brief encounter. There was a bond forming between him and these people, especially Atsari, that was hard to ignore. "I don't know," he said quietly. "I didn't expect to stay. I've been alone for so long. I guess I wasn't really thinking about anything beyond getting through the desert. But now I don't know. There's something here, something I've been missing." Atsari nodded as if she understood. "The desert tests a man," she said, her voice carrying the weight of years spent in the harsh conditions. "It strips away everything except what is truly important. If you stay here, you will face that test. It is not an easy path, but it will show you who you really are." Jackson thought about her words. They rang true, but they also made him uneasy. He had spent so long running from the truth of his own life, his past, his mistakes, his loneliness, that the idea of confronting all of it felt like a mountain too steep to climb. But there was something about the way Atsari spoke, with a calm that seemed unshakable, that made him think maybe, just maybe, he was ready to face it. That afternoon, Atsari took Jackson aside and led him to a nearby canyon where the tribe would gather for their rituals. She explained that this was not just a place for ceremonial practices, but also a place of learning and growth. Jackson would have to prove himself, not just through physical strength, but through his willingness to embrace the teachings of the Apache people. It was a test, a trial that would challenge both his body and his mind. Jackson wasn't sure what he had gotten himself into, but there was no turning back now. Atsari's presence had a way of making him want to try, to push past the limits he had set for himself. The trials began the next day. The first challenge was simple, but not easy. Jackson had to climb a series of rocky hills and retrieve a flag that was perched at the top of a steep incline. It wasn't a long distance, but the climb was treacherous. The rocks were jagged and the path narrow, forcing him to use every ounce of his strength and balance. His muscles ached, his fingers scraped against the rough surface, but he kept going. At the top, gasping for breath, he grabbed the flag and looked out over the canyon. The view was breathtaking. Vast stretches of desert dotted with occasional patches of green, all under a brilliant blue sky. For a moment, Jackson forgot about the pain in his body. Instead, he felt a sense of accomplishment, a small victory in a place that had seemed so foreign and intimidating only a few days before. But the challenge wasn't over. As he made his way back down, Etched appeared, watching him silently from the bottom. "Good," she said, her voice as steady as ever. "But this is only the beginning.